Aiden thought his mother left by choice, but the truth was locked inside a sealed family file. When he finally opened it, one name shattered everything. And what happened next made Dr. Phil stop the cameras for the first time in years. Aiden didn't mean to say it on national television. He planned to hold it in, breathe through the panic, and wait for the right moment. But when he stood across from his father, Mark, under those bright studio lights, something inside him cracked. His hand trembled around a worn envelope. An envelope he had opened and closed so many times the paper had softened around the edges. You could feel tension ripple across the audience. People leaned in. Even the stage crew shifted, sensing a shift in the air. Dr. Phil watched Aiden closely, the way he watches someone who's carrying more than they can hold. Aiden's voice barely rose above a whisper when he said, "You lied about why she left." That single line cut through the studio like a cold draft. Mark's eyebrows shot up, surprise flashing across his face before he shoved it down. He crossed his arms, a gesture he always used to settle control, and exhaled through his nose. "Aiden," Mark said, forcing a calm he didn't feel, "you're confused. We've been over this." But his voice shook, just enough for Dr. Phil to tilt his head. Aiden swallowed and lifted the paper. "This says otherwise." And suddenly the room went still. Not quiet, still, as if time had paused. The audience froze. The cameraman hesitated. Even Dr. Phil leaned forward like he already sensed that whatever was on that paper had the power to change everything. Mark took one step back. His eyes flicked toward the envelope like it was a threat. And maybe it was. "Aiden," he said again, sharper this time, "you don't understand what you're talking about. But the thing about the truth is, when you're cornered by it, denial only makes it louder." Aiden looked at his father, hurt pulling at the edges of his expression. "You told me she walked out, that she left us, that she didn't want me." Dr. Phil raised a hand, slowly, deliberately, and signaled for production to pause the taping. Gasps shot through the audience. Dr. Phil rarely does that. Almost never. The cameras stopped. The studio lights softened. A quiet settled in, heavy and uncomfortable. You could tell the crew knew they were witnessing something real. No script, no exaggeration, just raw human truth leaking out at the seams. Mark's jaw clenched. I said those things because they were true. But he didn't look at his son when he said it. He stared at the floor. And that tiny detail, him avoiding eye contact, was enough for Dr. Phil to notice something was terribly, painfully off. Aiden unfolded the paper with shaking hands. The sound of it, soft, fragile, echoed louder in that silent studio than any shout could have. He placed it on the table. Dr. Phil didn't touch it at first. He just stared, as though bracing for whatever truth was inside. "Aiden," Dr. Phil said softly, "tell me where you got this." Aiden breathed in, steadying his voice. "It was mailed to me by mistake. It was part of a sealed file with Mom's name on it." Mark's face drained of color. Right then, the audience felt a shift. The way storm air feels before thunder cracks. Everyone could see something had been hidden, a secret quietly rewiring the entire story of Aiden's childhood. Dr. Phil finally picked up the document. His expression tightened as he read the first line. He didn't reveal what it said. He didn't need to. His reaction said enough. Sometimes the truth doesn't speak. It shakes the room. Aiden watched his father, waiting for honesty. Waiting for a crack in the wall Mark had spent 20 years building. But Mark stayed silent. Too silent. And silence can be louder than lies. "What don't you want him to know?" Dr. Phil asked gently. That question hung in the air like smoke. And that was when Aiden realized this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. This was the beginning of unraveling an entire life he thought he understood. Because if a parent can lie about why someone disappears, what else can they lie about? 3 weeks after Aiden's 6th birthday, the house felt different. Quieter. He remembered waking up to sunlight spilling across his bedroom floor and the smell of coffee drifting down the hallway. But something was wrong. Kids may not understand adult problems, but they feel tension long before they can name it. And that morning, the air felt heavy, like the whole house was trying to hold its breath. He padded toward the kitchen, his little socks sliding on the hardwood. His father, Mark, sat at the table pretending to read the newspaper. His eyes kept darting toward the hallway, the one that led to the bedroom he shared with Aiden's mother. His hand shook each time he turned a page, even though he wasn't actually reading it. Aiden asked where Mom was. Mark said she needed space, so quickly it sounded rehearsed. Kids don't question their parents' tone. They question the spaces between their words. Aiden thought his mother was still upset about their argument from the night before. He remembered the muffled yelling, the sound of something falling, and his mother whispering through his cracked bedroom door, "Everything's going to be okay, baby." Then she kissed his forehead and closed the door with a soft click. But okay never came. As days passed, Mark repeated the same story to neighbors, friends, family members, and even the police when they came by for the routine missing person check. "She walked out," he kept saying. "She left us. I don't know why." His voice sounded steady, but his eyes always shifted away when he said it. Children notice the things adults try to hide. One afternoon, Aiden stood on his tiptoes and peeked into his parents' closet. Her favorite suitcase, the one she took on every vacation, was still there. Her wallet sat on the dresser. Her shoes lined up neatly, not a pair missing. Everything looked untouched, frozen in place like a museum exhibit. If someone leaves, they don't leave without the things that matter. That detail stuck in Aiden's mind for years. Mark tried to distract him with long drives, fast food, new toys. But grief has a way of sitting quietly in the back seat, no matter how fast the car moves. He avoided talking about her at all, and when Aiden asked questions, Mark always had an answer. A quick one, a polished one, the kind of answer someone practices in the mirror. Some people just can't handle family life. She wasn't happy. She needed a new start. But none of those explanations matched the image Aiden carried. His mother brushing cookie crumbs off his face, humming while folding laundry, dancing with him in the living room under the glow of a single lamp. She didn't feel like someone who would walk away without a word. And then, 3 months later, Aiden stumbled on something he was never supposed to see. It happened while he was playing with a toy car near his parents' dresser. The car rolled behind it, and when he reached to grab it, his hand brushed something wedged against the back panel. He pulled out a small piece of paper, crumpled, stiff, like someone had shoved it there in a hurry. It wasn't long, just a few lines, written in shaky cursive. "I'm scared. If something happens to me, please let someone know it wasn't my choice." Aiden didn't understand the full meaning at 6 years old. He just knew it didn't sound like the kind of letter someone leaves when they're walking away from their family. He showed it to Mark, thinking it would help. Mark ripped it in half before he finished reading. He told Aiden it was just her being dramatic, but his voice cracked on the word dramatic. His hand shook. His face turned pale. And that was the night Mark started locking his bedroom door. Little moments like these stick. They don't fade. They pile up in the corners of your memory until one day they form a picture you can't ignore. Aiden grew up carrying a quiet disbelief, a feeling that something about the story he'd been told wasn't right. But when you're a child, what power do you have? You just accept what you're given. Still, the clues were always there, waiting, because some secrets don't stay buried forever. They wait for the right moment to surface, sometimes in the form of a single envelope delivered to the wrong mailbox. What if the story you grew up believing was never the truth at all, but a script written by someone desperate to hide what really happened? Aiden wouldn't get the answer for many years. But the spark of doubt started that day, in a room filled with silence, a ripped letter, and a boy who sensed that the world around him had started to crack. Aiden was 27 when the envelope arrived. It came on a Tuesday, one of those ordinary, forgettable days when life feels predictable. He almost threw it away. The return address looked like junk mail, County Records Division. He assumed it was some automated notice or a property tax update he didn't want to deal with. But something about the weight of the envelope felt wrong. Too heavy, too intentional. When he tore it open and unfolded the first page, the world around him seemed to slow. His hands went cold. His vision blurred at the edges. It wasn't a notice. It wasn't a bill. It was a document stamped with the words "sealed, do not release without court order." But somehow, it had landed in his mailbox. She described a childhood that felt like a collage of things seen, heard, or perhaps dreamed. A mother she insisted was cold, but not cruel. A father she claimed she barely remembered, though no father figure appeared in any of her official files. She spoke with the certainty of someone who'd built her life on carefully arranged pieces of a puzzle, without ever realizing the pieces didn't come from the same box. And then, for just a moment, something slipped. When Dr. Phil asked how old she was when she moved out, she said 17. But earlier, she had claimed her mother kicked her out at 16. And in her application paperwork, she wrote 18. 3 different ages. 3 different stories. The camera zoomed in slightly. The audience felt the tension. It was a subtle shift, but the kind that tells viewers something big is coming. Dr. Phil let the silence stretch, watching her carefully. Sometimes silence is the most powerful question of all. Alyssa's fingers trembled. "Why does it matter?" she whispered. "Because details matter. Not to catch someone in a lie, but to understand what they're protecting themselves from." Alyssa had spent so long weaving this story that she didn't realize how fragile it was. Every sentence she spoke cracked a little more. Every memory she claimed to hold slipped further away. And sitting across from her, Dr. Phil realized something chilling. Alyssa wasn't just hiding from the truth. She was hiding from the truth because she was terrified it would destroy her. What happens to a person when the only identity they've ever known begins to unravel in front of the entire world? During the break between segments, the studio buzzed with attention that no one dared to name. The audience whispered among themselves, unsure whether Alyssa was unstable, traumatized, deceptive, or something far more complicated. Backstage, a producer handed Dr. Phil a sealed, orange envelope, the kind that never appears on camera unless absolutely necessary, the kind that contains answers no one is fully prepared to hear. It was the DNA comparison report. Dr. Phil didn't open it immediately. He turned it over in his hands, feeling the weight of it, not physically, but emotionally. Papers don't weigh much, but the truth they carry can be heavy enough to crush someone. And if this envelope held what the producer suspected, it wasn't just going to crack Alyssa's story. It was going to shatter it. Meanwhile, Alyssa sat alone in a small room backstage, hugging her knees to her chest. A staff member hovered nearby, but she didn't speak. She just kept staring at her scar, tracing it with her thumb over and over again like she was trying to remember how it got there. Her breathing was fast and uneven. She looked like someone bracing for something she couldn't name. And in that small, brightly lit room, something about her began to change. Her voice, when she finally spoke, sounded distant. "Hello. I don't know why I can't remember things right," she said. "It's like they happened, but not to me." It was the first honest sentence she'd spoken all day. Back on the main stage, Dr. Phil pressed his fingers against the envelope again. He had seen dissociation many times before. He recognized the signs, the faraway stare, the fractured memories, the way Alyssa seemed to float in and out of her own story. People who experience deep trauma sometimes split themselves into pieces just to survive. But dissociation alone didn't explain the false documents, the missing records, or the photo manipulation. No, something else was happening. Something deeper. Something almost unfathomable. Finally, he broke the seal. Inside were 2 pages, a profile summary and a match result. The summary listed Alyssa's DNA markers, straightforward, scientific. But the match result was what made Dr. Phil's eyes widen slightly. It connected Alyssa's DNA not to the woman she claimed as her mother, but to another woman entirely. A woman who lived just 90 miles away. A woman who filed a missing persons report 20 years ago for her daughter, who would now be 28 years old. The same age Alyssa claimed to be. The report stated there was a 99.7% likelihood that Alyssa was this missing girl. The room seemed to shrink around him. This wasn't an identity crisis. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't someone exaggerating their past. This was a person who had been living under the wrong name for so long that she forgot, or forced herself to forget, who she really was. But then came a twist. The part that made even the seasoned producer step back. The biological mother was already in the air on a flight to Los Angeles. She was coming to the studio. She thought she was reuniting with a daughter who had been kidnapped. But Alyssa's file told a different story. Aiden hadn't slept in 2 days. The file sat on his kitchen table like a living thing, demanding his attention every time he walked by. He kept rereading the same name, Evan Hartley. A stranger he was somehow connected to. A name Mark had never spoken. A name tied to the last messages his mother left behind. Every time Aiden tried to step away from it, something pulled him back in. And then, on a quiet Thursday evening, someone knocked on his door. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rushed. Just 3 soft knocks, spaced out. But they hit Aiden like a jolt. He froze mid-step, listening. Nobody ever came to his apartment without texting first. Nobody just showed up. His first thought was that it might be Mark, finally coming to demand the file back. His second thought was worse, that it might be some kind of warning. The knocking came again. Aiden walked slowly to the door, each step heavy. His heart pounded against his ribs. When he opened it, he didn't recognize the man standing there. Mid-40s, nervous eyes, shoulders tense. He looked like someone who had rehearsed what he wanted to say, but still hadn't found the courage. The man held a folder identical to the one Aiden had received. "Aiden," he asked softly. Aiden hesitated. "Yeah, who are you?" The man exhaled a shaky breath. "My name is Evan. Evan Hartley." Aiden felt the ground tilt beneath him. The name wasn't just real, it was standing on his doorstep. Evan stepped inside only after Aiden nodded. He sat at the edge of the couch like someone who didn't want to take up space. He kept wringing his hands together, staring at the floor. "I've been trying to find you for years," Evan said. "Your mother wanted me to. She begged me to." That sentence hit Aiden like a punch. "My mother," he repeated, trying to steady his voice. "You knew her?" Evan nodded. "She was my sister." Aiden froze. It felt like someone had opened a window in a room that had been sealed shut for decades. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't speak. The world felt too bright, too sharp. He had an uncle, a real, living uncle, and Mark had erased him completely. "I know this is a lot," Evan said gently, "but you deserve the truth. All of it." Aiden's hand shook as he gripped the edge of the table. "Why didn't she come back? Why didn't she tell me anything? Why did she leave?" Evan closed his eyes, pain stretching across his face. "She didn't leave, Aiden. She was taken." The room fell silent. Aiden felt the words echo through him. Taken. The meaning hit harder than anything the file had revealed. Evan continued, voice trembling. "Your parents were in a legal battle. It was ugly. Threats were made. She filed reports. She documented everything. But the more she tried to protect you, the more dangerous things became for her. She filed that DNA request because she believed Mark was going to twist the custody case against her. She was scared, Aiden. Terrified." Aiden felt his chest tighten. "So what happened to her?" "She was put into protective custody during the investigation," Evans said. "They moved her for safety. She wanted to take you with her, but the order didn't allow it at the time. She thought she'd only be gone a few weeks. But then things got worse. The case took longer. Evidence went missing. Files were sealed. And before she could come back for you, Mark, he made sure she couldn't." Aiden felt like he couldn't speak. His throat burned. His heart felt too big, like it was pressing against his ribs, trying to escape. Evan looked at him with eyes full of regret. "She never stopped looking for you. I didn't stop either. But every time we got close, the trail went cold. Someone was blocking us." Aiden realized something awful in that moment. "Mark," he whispered. He knew. Evan nodded slowly. He didn't want her getting custody, and he didn't want you knowing the truth. The weight of the revelation settled over the room like fog. Aiden felt every childhood memory shift, every unanswered question, every strange reaction, every time Mark shut down a conversation about his mother. It all made sense now. Terrible, heartbreaking sense. Aiden stared at the file between them. "So all my life, I believed she abandoned me. She never abandoned you," Evan said firmly. "She was fighting for you, and she was silenced." Aiden wiped his face, not realizing he'd started crying. "Why now? Why come now?" Evan reached into his folder and pulled out a more recent letter. The handwriting was older, shakier, but unmistakably hers. "She found you," Evan whispered, "and she sent this. She wanted you to know she's still alive." Aiden's breath hitched. Alive. The word felt unreal. Fragile. Dangerous. "You don't have to believe me yet," Evan said. "But tomorrow on that stage, you will finally hear the truth." Aiden stared at him, trying to process it. The room felt too small, too heavy with everything he'd never known. And then, Evan added the one sentence that changed the entire direction of Aiden's life. Your mother is ready to see you, if you're ready to hear what really happened. The question hung in the silence, trembling like a candle flame. Would you forgive someone who kept your entire identity hidden to protect you? The answer would come soon, and the world would hear it live. The studio felt different when they returned to taping. Not louder, not brighter, just heavier, like everyone could sense something was about to break open. Dr. Phil walked back onto the stage with a seriousness that made the audience shift in their seats. Aiden sat on one side of the stage, hands clasped tight, foot tapping uncontrollably. On the other side, Mark kept glancing toward the doors, as if expecting someone to burst through them at any second. And maybe he was right to be afraid. Evan sat behind Aiden, silent, steady. The presence Mark never expected to confront. The presence he spent 20 years erasing. His jaw clenched every time he looked at Evan, and the guilt on his face was no longer subtle. It was a spotlight he couldn't outrun. Dr. Phil opened the file again, laying the papers between them like evidence in a courtroom. Aiden, he said gently, for the sake of clarity, tell your father what this file is. Aiden took a breath. It's a sealed case file about Mom. A file I wasn't supposed to see. His voice cracked on the word Mom. He steadied himself. It shows she didn't walk out. She didn't leave by choice. She filed complaints. She filed for help. And she filed a DNA request on you. Gasps echoed through the studio. Mark shook his head instantly. This is ridiculous. Aiden, that file is full of misunderstandings. Your mother wasn't mentally stable. She was emotional. Don't, Aiden said quietly. Don't use that excuse. Dr. Phil held up his hand. Mark, I want you to be very careful with your words right now. Because these documents, these dates, these reports don't match your story. Mark swallowed hard. I was trying to protect him. By lying? Aiden asked. By keeping things simple, Mark snapped back. You were a child. You wouldn't have understood. Aiden leaned forward, anger rising behind his eyes. Then why didn't you tell me when I was older? Why hide letters? Why hide Evan? Why hide everything? Mark looked around, trapped under the weight of the audience's silence. Because I didn't want you choosing her over me. There it was. The sentence that changed everything. The audience murmured. Evan closed his eyes. Aiden stared at his father like he had never seen him before. Dr. Phil leaned back, exhaling. Mark, that's not protection. That's control. Mark rubbed his forehead, his mask slipping. Years of deception finally cracking. I was terrified she'd take you away. She threatened to. She said she'd fight for full custody. I panicked. I said things I shouldn't have. I did things I shouldn't have. But I was scared of losing my son. Aiden's voice softened just barely. So, you let me believe she abandoned me? You let me think she didn't want me? Mark's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know how to fix it once the lie started. Every year that passed, it got harder to tell you the truth. The studio fell silent again. You could feel the collective heartbreak for Aiden, years of stolen memories pressing down on him. His expression shifted. Not just anger now, but grief for all the time lost, for all the birthdays without her, for every moment he needed a mother and was told she didn't care. Dr. Phil leaned forward. Mark, I want to ask you something. When her file was sealed, who requested it? Mark's lips parted. His breath caught, and that small hesitation said more than any confession. You did, Dr. Phil said softly. Didn't you? Mark didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence confirmed it. Aiden shook his head slowly. You didn't just hide her, you hid the truth itself. Evan finally spoke, his voice calm but cutting. She begged the courts to let her see him. Every year. Every single year. The only reason she didn't find him sooner was because of you. Tears spilled down Aiden's cheeks, but he didn't wipe them away. He stared at his father with a pain so deep the audience could feel it echo. Dr. Phil placed a hand on Aiden's shoulder. You have been living with a rewritten history, but now you know the truth. And the truth may be messy, it may be painful, but it sets the foundation for real healing. Aiden nodded, taking a breath that sounded like it hurt. I want to see her, he whispered. I need to. Mark lowered his head, defeated. I never wanted it to get this far. Aiden looked at him with a sadness that felt older than he was. It didn't get this far, Dad. You took it this far. And that was the moment Dr. Phil made the announcement that stunned everyone. Aiden, your mother is here. The audience exploded. Evan covered his mouth. Aiden froze, his breath catching, like his heart forgot what to do. Mark slumped backwards in his chair, shaking. Everything was about to change. The lie was over. The truth was ready to walk onto the stage. The studio doors opened so slowly it felt intentional, like the entire world needed to hold its breath before the truth stepped into the light. Aiden's eyes locked on the entrance. His hands froze midair. Even Dr. Phil, a man who had seen every kind of human emotion unfold on that stage, looked shaken. Then she appeared, a woman in her late 40s, hands trembling, eyes filled with a pain that had been carried far too long. Her steps were careful, almost fragile, like she was afraid that if she moved too fast the moment might disappear. She wasn't dressed dramatically. No makeup team, no style entrance. Just a mother who had waited 20 years for her son to look at her and know the truth. Aiden stood without realizing it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just stared. Time stretched thin, every second heavy with everything they had lost. Then she whispered, "Aiden, baby, is that really you?" Her voice cracked on the last word. That sound broke him. Aiden's face crumpled, and before he could think, he crossed the stage. His mother, shaking, opened her arms. They met in the middle, collapsing into each other like two halves of a story, finally finding the missing pages. The audience gasped, some cried, but the world around them disappeared. It was just a mother and a son holding on to each other with 20 years of strength they didn't know they had. "I look for you every day," she whispered into his shoulder. "Every single day, Aiden." Aiden choked out. "Why didn't you come back?" She pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. "Because every time I tried, someone shut the door on me." Her gaze drifted to Mark. He couldn't look up. Not at her. Not at Aiden. Not at the wreckage of the life he had orchestrated. Mark's face twisted, grief and guilt warring behind his eyes. Dr. Phil stepped in gently. "Mark, you owe them the truth." Mark ran a hand over his face, finally breaking. "I thought I was doing the right thing, at first. I told myself I was protecting him, but I was really protecting myself. I didn't want to lose him. I didn't want him to see how ugly things had gotten." Aiden's mother wiped her eyes. "You didn't lose him, Mark. You stole him." Mark flinched at the word stole. "I wasn't perfect," she continued, voice trembling with anger and heartbreak. "I was scared. I was fighting for custody because I didn't want our son growing up surrounded by fear. And when the threats started, when the case got messy, the courts put me somewhere safe. But you made it look like I chose to leave. You took every letter, every request, every attempt I made to come back." Aiden shook his head slowly, realizing the magnitude of the deception. "You let me believe she abandoned me." Mark didn't defend himself. Couldn't. Dr. Phil leaned in. "The truth is painful. But this moment, this reunion, it's the first step toward healing. Not just for Aiden, for all of you." Aiden's mother reached for her son's hand. "I missed your entire childhood, your first heartbreak, your graduation, everything. And I can't get those years back. But if you let me, I want to be here now. I want to be your mother again." Aiden looked at her, a woman who had been a ghost, a mystery, a wound that never healed. Now she was real, alive, holding his hand with a tenderness he had dreamed about for years. "I want that too," he whispered. Emotion rippled across the studio. A reunion story unfolding in real time. A truth revealed. A family secret finally exposed to the light. But healing doesn't end with a reunion. It begins there. Aiden turned to Mark. "I don't know if I can forgive you. Not today. Maybe not for a long time. But I need you to understand something. The truth always comes out. And the lies you told, they didn't protect me. They broke me." Mark nodded weakly, tears falling freely now. "I am sorry. I'm so sorry." Dr. Phil stepped forward for the final reflection, his voice calm but firm. "There are no winners when a child becomes the battleground of adult conflict. But what you choose from this point on, that's what determines the legacy of this family." The light softened. The audience stayed silent. Aiden held his mother's hand, knowing life after today would never look the same. But for the first time in decades, it finally felt honest. Because the truth had walked through the door. And this time, nobody was going to seal it away. The taping wrapped hours later, long after the studio audience had filed out quietly, still wiping their eyes. But for Aiden, the real story didn't end on that stage. It began the moment the cameras powered down and the room fell into a softer, more human kind of silence. Aiden sat with his mother in a small backstage room. Just 2 chairs, 1 box of tissues, and 20 years of missing time hanging between them. She studied his face the way someone studies a photograph they've held onto for too long, desperate to memorize every detail. Aiden didn't speak at first. He just listened to her breaths, uneven but real, and tried to convince himself that this was truly happening. "I used to imagine what your grown-up face looked like," she whispered. "I never imagined I'd get to see it for real." He swallowed hard. "I used to imagine what your voice sounded like. I didn't know if I remembered it right." Her hand trembled as she reached for his. "I'm so sorry you had to grow up without me." Aiden squeezed her fingers. "I'm sorry too, but I'm glad you're here now." And that single sentence, for the first time in 2 decades, allowed both of them to breathe. Meanwhile, outside the room, Mark sat alone on a bench in the hallway. Security didn't escort him out. Dr. Phil didn't scold him or comfort him. Nobody said a word. It was the kind of silence people reserve for someone who's realizing the magnitude of the damage they caused. He stared at the wall, eyes unfocused, replaying every choice he made, every lie he told, every moment he convinced himself he was the hero of his own story. But the truth had stripped all that away. And now he sat with nothing but regret. Evan approached him cautiously, not with anger. Evan had carried anger for too many years. What he carried now was something heavier. "You took 20 years from her," Evan said quietly. "But you also took 20 years from him." Mark didn't look up. He just nodded. "I know. Then do something different now," Evan continued. "Stop trying to control everything. Let Aiden decide how this story moves forward." Mark's voice cracked. "I don't think he'll ever forgive me." Evan sighed. "Forgiveness isn't owed. It's earned. And sometimes it takes a lifetime." Back in the room, Aiden's mother reached in her purse and pulled out a small stack of papers. Yellowed edges, handwritten ink, worn from being read too many times. Letters. Dozens of them. "These were for you," she said softly. "Every year on your birthday, I wrote one. I mailed some. Others were returned. Some I kept, hoping one day I could hand them to you myself." Aiden held the letters gently, like they might break. He didn't open them yet. Just the weight of them in his hands was enough to overwhelm him. "I don't know what comes next," Aiden admitted. "I don't know how to fit 20 years of pain and 20 years of love into one day." "You don't have to," she said. "Healing isn't a finish line. It's a beginning, and I'll walk at your pace." Aiden nodded slowly. He looked toward the hallway where Mark was sitting, shoulders folded inward like a collapsed house. And for the first time since the truth came out, Aiden felt a strange, quiet clarity. He didn't owe Mark forgiveness today. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not ever. But he owed himself peace. And peace begins with honesty, something they had finally reached. A producer peeked into the room. "Dr. Phil would like a final moment with all 3 of you." Off camera, Aiden stood, letters pressed to his chest. His mother stood beside him, steady and present. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't walking into a battle. He was stepping toward a future he finally had control of. As they walked down the hallway, Aiden passed Mark. He didn't stop. He didn't speak. But he didn't look away either. And that tiny glance, a glance filled with pain, confusion, and maybe a small seed of future understanding, was more than Mark deserved, but exactly what Aiden was strong enough to give. Dr. Phil waited in his office, quiet and thoughtful. He looked at Aiden, then at Mark, then at the mother who had been absent in body, but never in heart. "This isn't the end of your story," Dr. Phil said. "It's the first honest chapter you've had in years. What you build from here, that's up to you." And as Aiden stepped into the room, letters in hand, mother by his side, and years of truth finally unburied, he felt something he hadn't felt since childhood. Hope. Real hope. The kind that grows in the space where lies once lived. The kind that starts when a family stops running from the truth and finally faces it together. If this story touched you, share your thoughts or experiences below. You never know who might find comfort or courage in your words. And if you want more stories about truth, healing, and family redemption, stay close. There's more on the way.